I've actually invented a new genre of simulation called first-person futures, not to be confused with first-person shooters, to take an abstract idea like smart toilets and have people make a visceral, intuitive, first-person connection to what this future might feel like. We're trying to create feelings about the future, feelings that come from actually putting yourself in a first-person way. So some of our first-person futures are actually set in the real world with these artifacts, where we actually put you in the future, not necessarily with your consent, and then we find out how you feel about it. There's a reason why we do this, besides just wanting people to be better connected to their future selves. Research shows that powering up the medial prefrontal cortex actually helps you be better able to shape the future in the way that you want it to turn out. So not to be a passive recipient of the future, but to get better at actually deciding what the future should be. One thing we know from studies is that if you've had a first-person experience of a future, that you will pay more attention to those signals as the future unfolds. So whether you like it or not, you all will be paying more attention to smart toilets since you took a moment to imagine yourself in a future with surveillance toilets. From now on, when you see a tweet about it, or you see an article about it, you hear someone talking about it, your medial prefrontal cortex is going to power up and say, wait, this matters to me. Okay, so I've hacked your brain a little bit to care more about this future. You're more likely to engage with it, not just let it happen to you. We also know that when the medial prefrontal cortex fires up when you think about a future, it also fires up another region of the brain that is responsible for scanning the environment for changes that may require you to adopt a different strategy than the one that's been working for you previously. And this actually fixes one of the major neurological obstacles to thinking effectively about the future. We all have a neurological bias to assume that the future will be like the present. That's because our brain likes to come up with strategies and habits and routines that tend to work, so we don't have to tax ourselves constantly trying to answer the question, what should I do in this situation? So we like to create these routines, but the routines only work if the environment stays the same. There is a part of the brain that looks for indications that, wait, maybe the routines won't work so well anymore. This part of the brain fires up if you're doing a first-person future. So you're actually less likely to miss the important signals. You're more likely to spot them earlier, so you have more time to adapt and, again, not get blindsided by the future, which helps explain this recent study, hot off the press, just published in January. It's the first long-term study of future thinking at an organizational level to see if companies where they practice this kind of first-person thinking about the future, scanning for signals, creating artifacts, trying to immerse themselves from multiple points of view into how this future might play out, does it actually help them survive the future? And they found by studying 81 for-profit companies over 7 years that at the start of the study, being highly engaged in this specific kind of futures thinking predicted 7 years later 33% greater profitability and 200% increased growth. So at an organizational level, there was a big payoff as well. So I'd like to just do one more first-person future with you, look for signals of one more strange future. And this is one of the futures I've been researching at the Institute for the Future that has a lot of people reacting very strongly. And I thought I would really love to leave you with a future that I have seen some pretty extreme reactions to and see how you respond. So the first signal of this future is a headline you may have seen this year. Young men are playing video games instead of getting jobs, and that's totally okay for now. This headline stems from a major report from the National Bureau of Economic Research, which found that because video games have gotten so good, it has actually motivated men to spend less time in paid employment and spend more time playing video games. And just last week, the International Monetary Fund released its own report on the same topic, saying, yep, not only in the United States, we're also seeing this in Europe too. Young men are working less because they want to spend more time playing video games. Let me show you some of the numbers behind these reports. In the past year, 22% of United States men in their 20s without a college degree did not work a single day of paid employment in the entire year. So 1 out of 5 men in the US who didn't get a college degree, not working at all. That's up from 10% in 2000. And for young men without a college degree who did work, they were working significantly fewer hours, at least a day less of full-time work per week. And what these researchers found is that 75% of this newly free time that these young men have freed up by working less is being spent playing video games. And this was their key insight, that these young men actually value the benefits of gaming more than they value the benefits of minimum wage income, which is to say that the social benefits, the improvements to their mood and their energy and their enjoyment of the kind of problem solving and skill acquisition they're doing, they just value that more than a couple $100 a week. And so the study suggests they're actually making a rational economic choice, that it is in their rational economic interest to work less and play more games. And this was the big surprise of the study. They found that the happiness of these men who stopped working to play video games went up. Their health improved, their physical health improved, not just their mental health. They had more social connectivity than the people who were still working more. And this was kind of like a shocker for the people doing the study, who were sure that this decision would actually ruin their lives. Now, more young men may be facing a similar scenario in the future because the demographics that spend the most time playing video games today, young men between 18 and 35, especially young men without a college degree, those are the most intense gamers right now. Those are the same people being automated the most quickly out of employment. There's a lot of conversation about just how many jobs will be automated and how employment figures will change in the future. Most people I talk with agree that young men in this age group who do more of the difficult manual labor, the dangerous labor, that they are more likely to be automated than others. However, as Kevin Kelly, a futurist I admire greatly, has pointed out, mass automation may be a chance to discover what humans are uniquely good for. Let robots do what robots are good for, and let humans do what humans are good for. And if there's one thing we know humans have been good at since the dawn of humanity, it is playing games. This is a game from 1800 BC Egypt called Game of Hounds and Jackals. Anyone ever played this game? No? I will. Please feel free to join me for a round of this after the talk. And if humans are getting automated out of jobs, the one kind of work we shouldn't be worried about them getting automated out of is playing games, because as we've seen historically, watching humans get beat by AI is not a lot of fun, and that increasingly people are interested in playing with and against other humans, right? The rise of esports is a great signal of that. So let me give you a very strange future forecast that I want you to let it sit in your brain today and take it with you and see what you make of it. What if, by the year 2030, most men ages 18 to 35 in the United States and China without college degrees do not have full-time jobs, but that's okay, because by 2030, most video game companies are actually paying players to play their games. Welcome to the world of wage play. This is an idea put forth by Edward Castronova, the famed economist of virtual currencies and video game environments. And this idea is pretty simple, that some number of video game players in the future will receive essentially a basic income that allows them to pay for most of their essential living supplies in the form of probably cryptocurrencies. Now, why would video game companies pay players to play? Well, in 2018, we know that free-to-play games dominate the industry, and only 3 to 7% of players ever spend any money on the most popular games. Half of all their revenues are generated by 0.2% of their players. So 1 in 500 players provide half of the revenue for this industry. These are called the whales or the big fish players. And that means that the other 499 out of every 500 players, or the little fish, are there not to provide revenue to the game company, but to provide meaning to the play of the big fish, right? Because what does a big fish want? It wants to be surrounded by little fish. And how do you make the big fish feel important and never want to leave? You ensure that they are surrounded by as many little fish as possible. We see in the game economy today that big fish move on to new games when players start to leave for new games as well. And that's why video game companies in the free-to-play market spend half of their revenues on advertising to acquire new players. They have to keep the big fish surrounded by little fish. Economically, would it possibly be more efficient to simply pay the players to play your game, you're already spending half of your revenue advertising to them. What if you created a work opportunity instead? Now, at the Institute for the Future, we have this painted on our front window. If you came to visit us in Palo Alto, you would see our motto: any useful statement about the future should at first seem ridiculous. And I grant you the idea that most video game companies will pay people to play them in the future sounds ridiculous on the face of it. But I want you to spend just a few more seconds first-personing this future so you're better able to look for signals that this ridiculous future may be coming to pass. So take a moment and think about your favorite game, if you have a favorite video game. If you don't have a favorite video game right now, think about someone you love and what they might be playing. Think of that game, and I want you to imagine it's just a couple years from now. You're still playing this game, and every day there's a lottery. 1 in 20 players at the end of the day get paid minimum wage for whatever hours they put into the game. Okay? How do you feel? Just think about that. Let that sit. Okay? The next time you pick up this game to play, keep this future with you and ask yourself, what if I were getting paid minimum wage to play this game? How would that change my behaviors? I want you to keep this future with you and keep looking for signals that make it sharper and clearer and more vivid. What you're engaged with when you think about the future in this way is something very special. Evolutionary biologists have pointed out that humans are the only creatures in the universe that have the ability to think about the long-term future. It's essentially a new invention in evolution. Only our brains can do it. I encourage you to keep thinking about the future in this first-person way. Come spend some time with us at the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto or online at iftf.org. And I will look forward very much to seeing you at RSA again in the future, perhaps a few years from now with surveillance toilets. Thank you very much.